iPhone 17 Pro Max versus the iPhone XS Max 7 years later. Let's go ahead and see how far Apple has come from the very first Max phone all the way to the iPhone 17 Pro Max. This should be pretty fun. So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and we're going to do a nostalgic comparison once again today to kind of see the progression and the evolution and how well the XS Max still does here 7 freaking years later. This is insane. 2018 is when this phone came out, and this phone, adjusted for inflation, is pretty similar in price to the iPhone 17 Pro Max, but look how much more you get now all these years later. This phone started at $1099, which is actually what the iPhone 17 Pro is around. So it's pretty much same as that, but you kind of got to account for the adjusted purchasing power of the dollar. This phone back in 2018, if you adjusted it for today, would have been around $1,380. So kind of close. They haven't really massively increased the price of these Max iPhones over the years, which is pretty good for you. Although they are definitely up when we talk about the storage tiers, if you go to the 2 terabyte and stuff of that sort. Let's discuss the body and the build. Our focus is going to be a lot on the XS Max here in this video. This is the nostalgic comparison here. But in a lot of ways, I actually still find this phone to look classier and more premium than even the brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max. If you take a look at the edges, this gold, man, this gold just looks super, super luxe. Look how like shiny it looks, and also being a stainless steel body. I used to really like when they put the iPhone on there. It just looked clean. And you can see right there, Apple logo. You can see right here, Lightning port. Everything was nice and lined up nicely. This was not too thick at the time. Very rounded edges on the iPhone XS Max here. And overall was a very comfortable 6.5. The camera bump was pretty small, although people called it sharp. They could cut an apple with this thing. It was so sharp. But at the same time, you weren't really touching it. You didn't really feel it because it was all the way up to the left corner. Just a clean, simple vertical camera array. So I love this design. I think it looks really good. You'll see right here, we do have a silent switch here. And there is no camera control or anything like that, but I'm not accidentally pressing anything, which is good. We also had a SIM card tray. They no longer have that. And I think the power button is actually larger now than it used to be. No, it's actually kind of close in length, just a little bit thicker. So it is a thicker button. But you can see the iPhone 17 Pro Max here does have the camera control right there. So yeah, honestly, just holding this phone, it feels more luxurious than the 17 Pro Max. It looks nicer to me overall. If we take a look at the 17 Pro Max, yes, it looks more modern. It looks more like a beast. It looks like it can do more. But I just can't get down with aluminum over the stainless steel when it comes to the price I pay. I mean, this material was found on cheaper iPhone 7s and stuff like that. So having a similar material, and then this big antenna up here. Look at this up here. No antenna up there, nothing like that. This is just not clean to me. Also, this camera plateau is just this big blotch on the top of the phone. This is my main phone, but at the same time, it doesn't mean I think it's the best looking Apple has ever made. Look at how clean this is right here. Also, they brought that Apple logo extremely far down, so it doesn't look quite as clean as it would if it was more centered. But at the same time, two-tone design is unique. I do like that change here. USB-C is definitely a necessary upgrade, but overall, it's a thicker, heavier phone. And it is smooth. I do like the smooth feeling of the 17 Pro Max, and the battery is substantially better in the everyday use. But from a looks perspective, it definitely kind of went in a direction I'm not sure is my exact favorite. But the 17 Pro Max still has all the internal and functionality aspects that I want in a device, which is why I still really like the device a lot. But man, 7 years later, this thing has aged like a fine wine. Some people will say, no, that looks so old with the iPhone 10 look. But if you feel it in the hand, you probably would change your mind, especially if it's in the condition this one is in right here, which is basically mint. You would probably say, man, that was a nice phone for sure. Some people thought this gold didn't look quite gold on certain angles. But overall, you can definitely tell that they went to town with the premium look of this gold right here. I thought it was an excellent gold there on the XS Max. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. So let's talk about the displays here. It's been 7 years and our display is definitely a lot improved. If you compare this update, you can see bezels are far thinner. You can see that it's a much bigger 6.9, but when you really look at the functionality, it's not that improved. Like the XS Max is still a pretty sizable device. It doesn't feel small whatsoever. It actually feels bigger than the 6.3 inch phones and the base 17s and stuff like that. So it's actually kind of more like the iPhone Air in the size. And this device actually still performs. The display performs pretty well. It's pretty bright even now. And yeah, it's 60 Hertz, but honestly, it's not a big deal for being the age this is. The phone just tends to run pretty well on 18.7 right here, which is the latest software, and 18.7.1. It doesn't have the availability to get 26, but it definitely, that's definitely the latest 18 version. And I actually still like certain aspects of 18 better than 26. So this is still very, very usable now here in 2025, 7 years later, which only makes me believe that any Max you buy is going to be very usable for a long time. The notch though is definitely a lot larger, and this one definitely a lot smaller and way more functional. But you can see 7 years later, they have gone up a pretty sizable amount in display size. This is nearly like a phablet. The XS Max still feels like a phone. This feels like a mini tablet in your pocket, but either one of these, people who don't like big phones are going to say they're both absolutely humongous. They're absolutely large. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. The 17 Pro Max got brighter, it got bigger, and reduced bezels. Other than that, the core functionality all these years later is still virtually identical. Like I don't remember these new Maxes ever being life-changing. They're fun and they're definitely a refinement and a polish, but to say they're life-changing, no, not really. And also, my dream display still doesn't exist. We're kind of closer to it now here on the 17 Pro Max. My dream display is basically a bezel-less display with no dynamic island. Just basically all display. I think the closest I've ever seen to that was the OnePlus 7. That device had a pop-up camera and had curved edge, and it basically had no interruptions on the display. They kind of already made that before, but I want to see it on iOS. I also want to see a foldable iPhone as well, but my dream display still hasn't existed. I thought when the XS Max came out, we're headed in that direction. Years later, probably by 2020, I thought by like 2023 to 5, we were going to have that already, but nope, we have dynamic island for all these years, so we're still waiting. So discussing software, of course, the XS Max doesn't support iOS 26. However, iOS 26 is not the kind of update that is life-changing. Yes, it is a polish and a refinement and definitely a visual overhaul with liquid glass, but the visual overhaul is not like, they didn't change the core functionality of what iOS does. And why would they? They're never going to do that. But they didn't change like it's so much that it just feels like a entirely new phone. Like this still kind of looks similar. It's still the grid icon, still the dock over there, still has widgets, still supports the app library. You can see right there. So the core software is basically, I would consider this just like a transparency upgrade with some theming. That's kind of like what iOS 26 feels like. And of course, you do have all of the Apple Intelligence stuff here, but you could still run ChatGPT. You could still run, because that runs on their servers. You can still do AI-based tasks on here with Gemini, even on this 7-year-old phone. Is the XS Max still usable? And it's going to say, of course it is. But you can see, you can still search here with this kind of stuff. Of course, it's going to be slower when you use any other AI stuff that might require a little bit better hardware. But yeah, totally still usable here in 2025. Software wise, the control center definitely looks quite a bit different. It looks a little more modern on the new one, but you could actually chose to skip 26 on the prior to the 17 models and went to 18.7.1. So some people might still be running the 18 version, even on some iPhones that were not upgradable to, or were upgradable to 26, but they wanted to stick with 18. So let me know if you guys did that. Did you choose to stay with 18 or did you go all straight over to iOS 26? Let me know down below in the comments. So let's just launch a few apps. We're going to do some basic ones first, and you could see you could still do things no problem on the older phone. Let's go ahead and launch. How about we do Dead Trigger 2? And the games, they're going to warm up on the iPhone XS Max. They're going to launch significantly faster on the left. They're going to play better. But because a lot of the things for iOS are pretty much similar, like in terms of the apps, you'll be able to run and play a lot of stuff still on the XS Max. Granted, it'll be slower, but it's usable. And honestly, I probably would take the XS Max even now over some cheapy $200 budget phones. Maybe. Some of those are good too. But I do like that you still get iOS. And we'll go ahead and hit play over here. And we'll hit play over here. And you can see casual game, a little bit of stutter there, but that's a 60 hertz thing that I've seen on prior versions. Of course, kind of hopping back through the applications, you might get a little bit worse performance on the XS Max, but it's not going to happen over 3 applications. And you could see that didn't even reload anything. You could still launch speed test here, no problem. This is pretty cool that it lasted this long. It gives me a lot of hope for the future. And you could see A12 Bionic, 2.49 gigahertz, 4 gigabytes of RAM. This is just proof that iOS doesn't really need a ton of RAM or the highest clock speed because that software is so tightly controlled that it can even run well on a phone that is all these years old, 7 years old. So let me know your thoughts about that right there. As a matter of fact, that's actually kind of impressive how that's operating there. Just through kind of like going back through these apps and stuff, it seems almost like no issue whatsoever on this device. So that's impressive. I do like to see that for these older Max phones. So we're going to use this old XS Max Apple leather case. By the way, they don't even make the leather cases anymore, but they have this like nice wearing effect. So when they wore it down, you could see you could just tell you got some years out of this thing. We'll use that as a camera sample. And we'll go ahead and take a picture and we're going to see what happens here on this phone, how this looks. Now, to be honest with you, the iPhone XS Max's camera is still an impressive looking shot. Like, it actually looks good still. There's phones that definitely take worse photos than this. I would actually argue some phones that are brand new take worse photos and videos than the iPhone XS Max all these years later. That's how good the video and photo was for the time. If we go over here to portrait, that also worked well, panoramic. And again, because of the shape of this phone and just the way it feels in the hand, it was easy to hold this one hand, even for a Max phone, comparatively to that one. Now, the front-facing camera was 12 megapixels, and it also looks pretty good here, even in 2025. If we take a photo there, let's go ahead and click right there. You can see it. Does that look unsharp? That looks pretty sharp to me. So no real issue. If I go to video, and then I go ahead and hit HD, you can do HD 60. That's still solid. It gets the job done. And you know what's funny is back in these times, they weren't doing 48 megapixels and all these pro level things. So the camera was a little bit more just point and shoot, a little bit more consumer grade, I would say. Yeah, it was a Max phone, but now you kind of got to tweak them a little bit more to get the absolute best results from them if you want to use the raw modes and all that jazz. Yes, they still have that core consumer traits to them, of course, but an incredible amount of zoom has been upgraded. But the phones, the cameras are a little more complicated. I even had somebody ask me, it was actually my wife, was asking me yesterday, how do I go to portrait mode? And so I told her, you just have to hold down and slide, but she didn't know because they kind of like hit it down to these 2 features. So some people just don't even know that you got to swipe like that to go to different modes. So the camera itself is, to me, a lot better now, way more versatile, but also more complex to use than ever before, while still retaining a lot of the core elements that make it a pretty easy to use camera. And I do think the front-facing camera is a substantial upgrade with that ultra wide. This is probably the biggest upgrade in years on the front-facing camera, and it's definitely useful. I've already found this super useful, having that ultra wide angle. So I think in the areas of camera, if you're coming from something 7 years old, that is the biggest obvious change all these years later, is the cameras over this one, for sure. That's going to be more evident than almost anything, because there's just so many more lenses, there's so many more options than compared to the iPhone XS Max. Now, discussing the battery life, can't you just tell by the thickness of this phone that this is going to be an absolute beast over this one? You can tell that's thinner and lighter. They're not going to be able to cram a battery as large in there. But here's the thing. The iPhone XS Max actually at the time was an all-day phone. I had it that was my main phone at that time as well, and I never really had issues getting through the day. I will tell you though, I would end the day with about 19 to 29% daily. So I definitely wasn't super confident I'd go to the next day. I always had to charge it every night. The 17 Pro Max, however, though, 7 years later, gets a crazy amount better battery life. I'm talking in the range of like, I could finish the day at like 59 to 70% if I'm being light on it, but I usually end the day in the 50s. That's more than half the battery remaining at the end of a heavy day use. That's pretty substantial on this phone. So battery life 7 years later, they've made multiple improvements and it is substantial. So 7 years later, this is a daily phone. It could still make it, but it's nothing like a heavy use phone. You start using the camera, you start gaming on this thing, it'll be drained by late afternoon. The 17 Pro Max though, this is a road warrior. This is an all day beast right here. So battery life 7 years later, definitely, this is no laughing matter. This is definitely a huge jump, going to anything like 16 Pro Max, 17 Pro Max. And I found that the XS Max, I always wanted a little bit more. That was the 11 Pro Max, which we might do a video comparison as well, a nostalgia comparison in the future. So thumbs up if you like this one. We'll do that one as well. Then the 13 Pro Max was the king in the lineup. Then the 16 Pro Max came back 3 years later and gave us similar to the 13 Pro Max, but now we have the 17 Pro Max, which is the legend. This one now is the new legend. It lasts longer than pretty much any Max phone I've ever used. Another area that actually got substantially improved was the audio. So you did have dual speakers on the XS Max, and it sounded good at the time. It's funny because this phone is 7 years old and it still sounds better than the iPhone Air. So this one can get louder and crispier. And this iPhone 17 Pro Max over here, it just sounds a little bit better. They got better at the richness of the audio. It's a little bit bassier coming out of these speakers right here. So it just kind of has like a higher quality overall audio performance than these previous iPhones did. They were a little bit tinnier to me. They're not tinny in the sense of like they sound weak or anything like that, but they don't have that nice warm tone that these newer speakers have. So hearing people through calls and music does sound almost like you're having a little portable speaker on these newer iPhones. These were solid in the back in the day, but they definitely don't feel anywhere near like this. And speaking of those phone calls, surprisingly, I used to always talk about how the iPhones were always behind Samsung in this department, but they finally have fixed this. One of the things that always happened to me on the older iPhone XS Max was I would have like 1 or 2 bars, and sometimes the 5G that would not work too well. Back in this time, the 4G LTE wasn't always like giving me the fastest speeds. Sometimes I would just like wait for a web page to load. And mobile, like the network performance area has gotten substantially better and faster to connect. So everything is just like boom, boom, boom today. Like back in these times, it was fast. Don't get it twisted. Like it got the job done. But the speed at which like my Bluetooth headphones could connect, the speed at which the Wi-Fi performance happens is just ridiculous these days. Like it's insane. Like I feel like it's faster than I can operate. I used to be like blazing through, like, come on, hurry up. But like now, it's going faster than I can even comprehend. So it's fast for the time, but this is on a whole nother level when it comes to that network performance. And I want to talk about an intangible, the core experience of what a phone does for you. The 17 Pro Max in this area honestly really hasn't improved my everyday too much, except for it's just kind of evolved to meet the standards of today. What do I mean by that? Well, for the time and leading up all the way till today, the core aspects of what I need a phone to do: make phone calls, browse the web, take good photos, have solid battery life, message, communicate, use some applications. Honestly, all of these traits can still be done on the iPhone XS Max, even in 2025 on 18.7.1. It can do all that. I could still order on Amazon things I need. I could still watch YouTube videos. I could still go on social media. I could still post solid looking photos. I could still communicate with people. I could still download things. Although it will be a little bit slower to do all these things, I could still do it. I can even use a ChatGPT. I could still use Gemini. I could still use Grok. I could still video edit on here. It will be a little bit slower, but I could still do it. So the iPhone XS Max still does pretty much all the core traits you would need in a phone, even today. However, the 17 Pro Max has evolved to meet the standards of how fast you want everything to be done today. The needs of today are much more instant. People want things now. They want that smooth scrolling to browse their feeds. They don't want to be waiting on nothing. And so the 17 Pro Max gives you that. It's evolved to have cameras that can finally zoom further and give me more versatility without me needing to go to my main camera. That is a substantial improvement. And it lasts longer because people are on their phone more these days than ever before. So having people be on their phone at longer periods of time, definitely having a bigger battery has helped just kind of match today's standards. New Wi-Fi 7 systems are coming out and stuff of all that sort. So this has support for that. Also having the AI inbuilt, 12 gigabytes of RAM, supports this phone for future use. So this is a future-proofed phone in a way. And also just having the iOS 26 fresh paint job on here, this phone just kind of gives you things you kind of need to keep up with the times. But again, at the core experience, they're not life-changing. They're just evolving to meet today's standards. And so I think that's why a lot of people are looking forward to see Apple do another iPhone 10 moment. I think they tried it with the Air, but it didn't work. So I think we're going to see it again with the iPhone Fold. So that's the one I think people are going to say, well, finally, we have something different. Finally, something that makes me feel like I'm using a whole different product experience. So I'm extremely excited for the upcoming foldables that are going to be launching. I will 100% be covering the iPhone Fold on this channel. So you might want to be subscribed for whenever that does ever make its debut. So that's my final verdict on the 17 Pro Max versus a 10s Max. The 10s Max has stood the test of time. And the 10s Max has stood the test of time. Does it feel old? Yes. But does it still feel premium? Absolutely. Does it work well? Yes. Does it work fast? Not really, but it's good enough. It's usable. Just put it that way. Does it hold you back? Depends on what you do in 2025. This is no laughing matter, though. It was funny to do, though, because this phone is so old by comparison. So thumbs up if you enjoyed this kind of video, and subscribe for more. I'll catch you all in the very next episode. Enjoy your Sunday. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.